2023 was a very interesting year for movies and TV shows. From seeing the death of the MCU, the DCEU, and all of Warner Brothers animation, I think we're all looking for different outlets to find some good entertainment. And when I heard that Godzilla was getting the up-teenth movie, I didn't see how that would change the trend. King of the Monsters took iconic Godzilla monsters like Rotan, Mothra, and King Ghidorah and turned them into generic action figures for Godzilla to decimate. And Godzilla vs. Kong did kind of the same thing. So when I watched Godzilla -1, I was surprised to learn that I was actually really good. Koichi's a World War II kamikaze pilot who deserted his duties right before the end of the war. But before his officers could reprimand him, Godzilla appears and destroys the base, leaving him one of the lone survivors of the attack. Filled with survivor's guilt, he now struggles to rebuild his life. That is until he meets Noriko, a survivor of the war who is trying to find a way for this baby she found to survive. Koichi sees that Noriko really cares about this baby and decides to help her out by getting a job disarming mines in the Pacific, slowly building a home and some stability to better care for his newfound family. But it seems that Koichi's nightmares never end as Godzilla resurfaces and starts attacking the city, reminding him that his war is still not behind him and that now he has to face it head on. What will he and the others do to try to defeat this monster? Will Koichi be able to put all his fears behind him and muster the courage to fight this colossal beast? The biggest complaint you often hear from people about modern Godzilla movies is that they tend to focus way too much on the normal human characters as opposed to the epic giant monster scenes. And while I won't say that I can't understand where they're coming from, I also believe that the real problem is that the characters in these movies are usually really lame. Like, who even are these people? Well, I know her, that's Stranger Things. But as opposed to those movies, this one does something kind of interesting by actually having a plot, interesting characters, and some pretty strong themes. Koichi isn't your generic action movie protagonist, he's a pretty sympathetic character who goes through some pretty human struggles. Seeing him want to survive the war no matter the cost and also instinctually wanting to take care of Akiko is a way more grounded idea than anything the other movies have had. I feel like we don't really get family values portrayed in movies anymore, so I like that this movie shows the importance of the nuclear family. It's very compelling to see all of these characters do everything in their power to make sure Akiko can be raised properly. Seeing Noriko instinctually be a mother to this baby that isn't hers and taking the initiative to get a job in a house, and seeing Koichi become a father by going out to work defusing the mines is so selfless that it gets you deeply invested in them as a family and makes you legitimately afraid for their safety. It honestly makes it kind of shocking at times because you have scenes where the characters talk about their drama and their problems, and then somebody will go, "Hey, we gotta talk about Godzilla." And I'm like, oh yeah, this is a Godzilla movie. Personally, my biggest complaint with the American Godzilla movies is that they always reduce the character to just this mindless monster that fights other mindless monsters, or just fights generic humans. While I can understand the appeal in seeing wanton destruction, I also feel like it's kind of a waste of the character. Godzilla is more than just a giant monster, he is the personification of one of the biggest tragedies to have ever struck Japan. A calamity so big that humans seem insignificant by comparison. But in the other movies, he's usually portrayed as a good guy. And yes, I know Godzilla can be a good guy, but I think seeing a story of humans finding a way to surpass this impossible challenge will always be more interesting than this. But unlike the other Godzilla movies, this is not made in America. This was made in Japan, and you can tell that they understand what works about the character and what doesn't. I really respect that this movie actually has the characters forming strategies and coming up with plans to defeat Godzilla. The humans aren't just idiots that exist to be killed, they actually feel like real people that do their best to survive. And because of that, Godzilla feels more like a tangible threat. He doesn't feel like an action figure that's indestructible, he actually gets kinda pieced up more than you would think. Tank fire and explosives severely injure him as opposed to just bouncing off harmlessly, making the tactics the humans come up with actually interesting to see, because this movie actually establishes Godzilla's power levels. The scenes where Godzilla is stomping around town and destroying buildings are really fun action scenes that show that sweet destruction you love to see, but they also serve to establish his abilities, like his super healing and his mouth laser. Oh, and man, the scene where he shoots the atomic breath. See, the thing is, you can make Godzilla shoot a more powerful laser when he goes Super Saiyan Pink in the new movie, but it's not gonna feel as powerful as this movie. Because it's not about the magnitude of the explosion or how flashy the effects are, it's about the impact that Godzilla's power has on the characters. The movie actually spends the time to show you how deeply traumatized Koichi is by being in Godzilla's presence, and it treats the damage of destruction he deals pretty realistically by actually acknowledging the consequences of vaporizing a city instead of just treating it like a Dragon Ball fight. There's only like 5 scenes with Godzilla, but every time he appears, that's when you know something cool is happening. These sequences are tight, they're suspenseful, and they also allow each character to show off their traits. Koichi's background as a kamikaze pilot also helps us understand why he's so paralyzed by the thought of dying. There's a lot of commentary here on battle tactics used by Japan in that time, and it challenges the idea that dying for the sake of others is honorable and just by saying that we're taking life for granted. It's easy to see yourself as heroic by sacrificing yourself for others, but your personal sense of honor should never come before protecting those who need you. Fighting a war shouldn't be about dying to defeat your enemy, but about living to save the ones you love. It's kinda like what The Last Jedi said, except actually good. So many action movies now are so miserable, constantly talking about how pathetic heroes are and treating them like an outdated concept. So it's nice to see a movie that talks about the value in human courage and how one act of bravery can inspire another. It makes it genuinely inspiring when you see normal everyday people decide to come together and help out where they are needed despite the danger everyone faces. It's kind of like The Rise of Skywalker, except actually good. And the fact that this was all done with a budget of $15 million is simply mind-blowing. I can't describe the whiplash you feel when you watch this and then go watch a Marvel movie with 10 times the budget only for them to look like this. And like, yeah, sometimes the effects look a little weird and Godzilla's face is kind of goofy looking, but honestly, these are just nitpicks. Because on one hand, I can admit that this movie isn't perfect. It certainly got some quirks with the plot. The movie does handwave why no one helped Japan deal with Godzilla. The actual science behind killing him is also kind of questionable. And yeah, the fake out death is something you're just supposed to kind of accept. But I don't think any of that really ruins the movie, because this plot is still able to get the characters through their journey. It convinces me that these characters deserve to win by giving me a reason to like them, as well as plenty of trials to make them earn their victory. Because looking back on it, this is probably the most enjoyable movie experience of 2023, because it's a movie that gives the audience a triumphant story with a positive message about human nature, as well as some pretty awesome action scenes that surpass mostly every other movie of the year. And after a year of miserable action films that leave you completely empty inside, I'm very glad to see this small film give me a story that actually made me feel happy to be a human being. And maybe when Godzilla x Kong comes out, people will not be as lenient towards these movies anymore, because now we've seen what a good Godzilla movie looks like, so I don't think we'll be as accepting of the usual crap like before. The bar has now been raised, and that is always a good thing. And as for Godzilla, even though he's not really a character, I think he's still deserving of being put on the villain list for having such a strong connection to the main character. A great, terrifying antagonist that brings out the best in everybody. 9 out of 10. That's all I got for this video. Goodbye!